Hi, Editing Queen here. Just popping in to let you know this recording, we tried to be fancy with our process and it didn't work out. As a result, you can hear some of my voice in Peppers' audio, almost like an echo. This won't happen in future episodes and we'll do our best to minimize it in this one. But thank you for being patient with us and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Malevolent Autopsy. If you're new here, welcome. This is a show hosted by patrons featuring patron content as Malevolent is in its fifth season, updating live. This show is chock full of spoilers since every episode is meant to comment on a live update. So if you want to avoid spoilers for all of Malevolent as it's been released to chapter 226 or part 46, check out now and come back next time. Our episodes are recorded live, so you can always listen later. I'm Queen, my pronouns are she, her, and tonight I control Arthur's right rib cage.
Amen.
Just the right side.
Like Adam himself. Hi, my name is Peppers. I go by she, her, and today I am going to control Arthur's throat.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with the summary. Arthur hears children laughing and wakes up abruptly, calling out for Thoreau. John reminds him where he is and what's happened, telling him he's been asleep for hours and the fire is nearly out now. Arthur asks if John was sleeping, and John explains he was thinking idle nonsense. After Arthur reassures him he'll sleep, John tells him that he was thinking of many things, including the witch, Hope, the story Arthur told in the elevator back in New York, and Lily. They continue to hear children laughing, and John says there is nothing to see. Arthur insists that it is not Malum, and John helps him put out the rest of the dying fire. John says he sees multiple dancing lights, unlike any movement he's ever seen before, and Arthur says he remembers stories about fairy spirits from his childhood. Arthur strongly believes they'll be of help, and John just says, all right. Normally in these chapter summaries, I don't mention Booth John very much, but I feel I have to this time. He says something is amiss since Arthur is acting foolish, and we are unable to hear the poll choice due to a scrambling of his voice. We can only make out a few select words and the ending, which was, I'd say choose wisely, but I believe that is not possible, followed by some very ominous laughter.
Yeah, those fuckers are will-o-wisps. Absolutely, 100%. That shit is fae. Those are will-o-wisps. They're gonna eat Arthur or whatever the fuck. Shout out to all my will-o-wisp believers. That shit is absolutely will-o-wisps. And Fish says, or it's not, or it's all an illusion. Yeah. You know, that really goes with everything. The fact that suddenly Arthur has lost all common sense. Not only that, but John is like, yeah, okay. Yeah, they both sound absolutely within their mind, especially hearing creepy fucking children laughing. Yeah, those are will-o-wisps, or like the souls of dead children trapped in like little fucking orbs that are gonna like consume him. So, no.
I feel like, I mean, definitely they're will-o-wisps. I suppose that there are a lot of, as always, theories floating around out there about what's going on. I don't think anyone is under the impression that Arthur is in his right mind. I definitely am interested in how that's possible because typically something like that, it's implied that in order to be swayed or in any way, I guess, manipulated by a supernatural creature of some kind, typically eye contact is a big deal. Actually seeing what's in front of you. I mean, that's theoretically why Arthur doesn't go mad when he's confronted with the horrors, because he's not actually seeing them. John's describing them to him, and he's spared having to comprehend these things with his eyeballs. So it's interesting to me that Arthur is still under some kind of thrall or spell or manipulation without physically being able to see these creatures. I'm not saying it's impossible that everything has to be able to make eye contact with you, but I just think it's an interesting bit. There are some people who are speculating that it might actually be Malum. I think he just left, so I'm not part of that train. I don't think Malum's coming back. I think he was a one and done.
Yeah. And listen, and this is also coming from just like a suspicious perspective of there's no way that's not somehow malignant. But also just from a story perspective, it's been too long since we've had a horrifying creature try to eat Arthur's face off.
Yeah.
It's been a full episode without anything horrible happening to him. Something horrible is gonna happen to him.
Well, I think at the very least he's going to encounter something dangerous. I think it would be interesting if it wasn't immediately just a mindless, awful creature that he gets led to. I think it would be interesting if it was something more puzzle or riddle or game based, where it's like, he follows these things and he gets led to a fairy circle, and then, there's like a series of things that has to happen before he just gets confronted with the awful creature. But I think that is definitely where this is headed. We have some people in chat talking about their theories and ideas. Scotty says it might be lamp F's, but might be wishful thinking on my part. Seer of Time says it's a compelling force with little sparkle emojis.
Yeah, because compelling forces are just so innocuous.
Graham says there's also a magic fog in Leary at that point that's bringing around all sorts of critters. For the lamp Fs, I think they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, what are lamp Fs?
So Fish just posted a lovely picture in chat, but for those who are only listening and won't be able to access the chat, they are kind of, I would say they're salamander-like, and they float and they glow and they have big, giant eyes that emit light.
Oh, they're blinky.
Everything about them. Yeah, they're Blinky. That was Blinky back
Ah.
from previous seasons.
The reason why I don't think they're Blinky or lamp Fs is because, they didn't make the same sound. Why suddenly? So we've already met one. We've already met a lamp F who makes a completely different sound. Has not at all suggested that it's malignant. It's just kind of there. And doesn't make baby laughing sounds. Yeah. Doesn't make baby laughing sounds. And
Yeah,
also,
Paper Flood says the same thing that I was thinking, which was also, wouldn't John recognize it from seeing one
yes,
before?
I was about to say that.
Although I would have to say, the fact that they fucking identified the owl as the exact same owl, even though Arthur does not know what it looks like, it has no idea, and John did not explicitly say it's the same owl. I know that's probably just storytelling and, one of those things that we're supposed to infer, but damn, the fact that there are occasions where Arthur's like, yeah, that's definitely the same owl. I just don't like the owl. I really don't get a good feeling about where's the owl right now?
We weren't even talking about the owl, and Queen's beef with the owl just came right up.
I don't like, it was relevant. I made it work. It's fine.
Whatever is calling to them, it is immediately after Malum has said, hey, by the way, this fire can encourage fucking creatures coming after you. Just by the way. Just by the way, it could. Well, I forgot his exact phrasing, but it was like, something may come to this light that may intend to do you harm. I don't remember the exact quote, but I was like, girl, that. And then suddenly there's floating lights. And then suddenly, instead of Arthur being like, what's going on? Why are there floating lights? Why is there a scary bunch of little children going ha 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 in the forest? He doesn't do any of that. He's like, they're going to help. I haven't asked a single question. They're going to help and we need to go to them. Will-o-wisps.
Fish is screaming at me, Queen, I have a theory. If this is a Ydra illusion, then it's the fucking owl's fault, because Malum just mentioned Furrow's light and hearing her laugh on the wind, and the fucking owl was right there and heard it and reported it to Mommy Darkness via Hive Mind. Whew. If you guys missed the info on Ydra and who that is, please listen to the last episode of Autopsy, where Fish got to come on and talk about protoplasmic owls and all kinds of awful things.
Shout out to Fish.
For sure. And we all just we were just listeners for that experience.
It was great, because I didn't have to say one damn thing.
Yes, it was great. It was an awesome little lore dump, and we appreciated it very much.
Well, and he brings some really good, lore and theories into just the poll chat and just the chat in general that I would have never thought of. And so I really love seeing Fish's theories of, how it kind of goes with the rest of the additional, I don't know if it's Lovecraftian or if it's specifically Call of Cthulhu lore, but it's fun. And Fish says, and when I'm wrong, at least it's funny.
I love you guys so much. We'll talk about this in a second in more depth for people who are not part of the Discord or are not patrons, but everybody's name, a lot of people's names, I guess I should say, are Zalgotextified or in some way scrambled right now. So I'm having a little trouble reading out who said what, but I'm going to do my damn
You
best.
can click on them
Um,
and see their actual name.
well, I can see their Discord name, but if they don't want me to like read their Discord name out and give it to everybody, I don't know. I'm going to just say this is
Well, then they shouldn't chat in here.
Bram, Bam, I don't know. I don't know. They, them pronouns and a lovely little Bram. Yes, there we go. I got it. I was gonna say fox icon. Bram says owl's a fucking narc, which I
Yeah.
love. If I need one more reason to hate that owl, owl's a fucking narc.
Oh yeah, it's definitely following them as like a spy. The question is it a good spy or is it evil?
Are you a good witch or a bad
Or a
witch?
bad witch? It depends on whether or not you're fucking ugly or not.
Fish says, what I'm curious about is where the hell Yorick at? Well, he's in the bag. I assume they just need to pull him out, but I wouldn't want that motherfucker out right now. He yaps too much.
I think York right now is employed, okay, and I say this like almost every single time, is applied very carefully because I have not been quiet about my reservations of Yorick and how he can really kill the mood very quickly regarding kind of tense situations. So I like Yorick, but I am also very used to Arthur and John's dynamic. And I think a lot of other people are very used to John's dynamic, or Arthur and John's dynamic. And throwing Yorick in as the third party member as like a frequent chatter would probably, in my opinion, the way that I see it, it would irritate a lot of people. So I think York is being used very sparsely and very carefully when he needs to be, which I like. York has not reached a point where I'm like, shut the fuck up about him, and I think because he's been used so carefully, that won't happen. It would be interesting to see what York had to say about this, but I think it's also good that York isn't employed because he might also kill the suspense by just saying, "Oh, my king, this is the Wickle Snackers, and they eat your toes," like like it's so much more interesting if that remains a mystery.
I love that. Good luck to whoever's transcribing, figuring out how to type that. Fish says, is he going to be following orders to shut the fuck up so long as he's in the bag? If so, that's funny as hell. Jingle Shark says, it's like when you put a towel on a bird cage. Graham says, Yorick is on his best behavior. Fish says, Yorick's hearing all of this, but he's like, Master told me I must remain quiet while I am in the bag. I will wait until I am pulled out of it to offer helpful information. Which is funny because I know his ass probably have something helpful to say about this. And I cannot help the mental image of Yorick doing that thing where when the printer's turned off and it has a bunch of backed up print jobs. And he comes out of that bag just like overflowing with information, but all of it is in like those stupid half sentences and cryptic riddles and shit, and it's all just flowing out of him. Also, everyone is typing Wickle Snackers.
we have our thing for this episode.
That is what autopsy fans are called, Wickle Snackers.
Wickle Snackers. They're Wickle Snackers.
What's up, Wickle Snackers?
Hey, Wickle Snackers, we're going on tour.
We need Wickle Snackers merch ASAP. Scotty says, does anyone think Yorick is the source of the Booth John interference? Yeah, I'm with Fish. Fish says it hasn't really crossed my mind, to be honest. I don't think so. Although I will say it's interesting that the only two times we've had like staticky vote nonsense happen has been with Yorick. I mean, the Vanguard makes him sound like a rapper, formerly known as Vanguard.
Formerly known as. I agree with that as well. When it comes to, I don't think Yorick could play his hand that easily. I feel like personally, I feel it's a lot more. It's a lot easier through line to assume that whatever the glowing lights are also what's causing the interference. And I did want to talk about this. Just to let everybody know, this week's vote is very interesting because the vote options are hidden in Zaglo text, or just a bit of a jumbled text. And it very similar to those of you who are familiar with ARGs. This feels very much like an ARG. And I am not very good with puzzles unless you give me money, and then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna find out. But when it comes to puzzles or anything like this, I always find a way to see how this somehow assists with the storytelling. And this very much is how I view the vote being encoded, or so hidden, as one might say. I just love the very unique way of illustrating how perhaps Arthur and John's very sense is their sense, their just rationality is being jumbled very much like the encoded text in order to make kind of a coherent decision. Whatever this thing is that's reaching out to Arthur and John, I believe, is kind of fucking up their coherence. And so
Yeah.
I find it a very fun, almost like story element of this is now bleeding into the very mechanics of the game that we're all playing. And that's just so fun. I love that. I haven't participated at all in attempting to decode it, but I remember just seeing it and being like, oh, that's so fun. That's so cool.
Yeah, so the vote this week, for those who wouldn't have seen it, is just some text that looks scrambled and put through sort of a staticky filter that is traditionally called like Azalgo text. So basically, you can't really tell what the vote is without decoding it, and decoding it has proven to be a very difficult process for voters. There is a thread dedicated to decoding it within the poll chat, and there is also a Word document and a few pinned messages in that thread for people who are trying to decode it. There are several very active people who are we're consistently trying. They got so far as to unzalgoify it and read the letters and then determine that the letters were code for numbers that were in ROT 13, which is a kind of encryption. From there, we've been trying to apply those numbers to everything you can think of. Every poem, every song, the chapter numbers, the vote numbers, the specific lines of parts, books, even pop culture media that Harlan has said has influenced Malevolent, such as The Last Unicorn and Evil Dead. Yes, thank you. And I mean, the document is 9 pages long now, probably a little bit longer eventually, probably at some point, because people have just been logging what they've been trying, and none of those things have worked so far in a way that has been satisfying to everybody unanimously or even overwhelmingly. So it seems like it's a little bit too difficult for us to figure out right this second. But in the future, perhaps, maybe we'll get clues later on. There were definitely people who were actually pulling out paper and pen and actual physical decoder books and trying to really really figure out what these polls were saying. You can probably find out more information if you look through the poll chat and the threads that are stored within there. If you join the Discord and the Patreon, that's the only way that you would be able to access that stuff. So if you want to try your hand at decoding and all of that, you can always join the Patreon. So that's probably, I would say, 10 or so people who are trying to decode actively all the time. Quite a few people tried and then just went, I'm just gonna vote for whatever kind of crunch is right. Which is kind of what I ended up doing. I tried for a good couple of hours to help in what way I could, and I did a lot of deep diving down wiki holes and trying to figure out where things connected and looking on Google Maps and stuff, but it didn't really help at all. And eventually I was just like, you know what, this is probably not going to get cracked. So I just picked what sounded good to me, which was the longer answer, and zoomed on out of there. So there's not really a way that we had any definitive answer for what those options were. I love what that does to the story. I think that's fun. I also know that the next couple of weeks at least, are going to be similar in that they are going to be coded. For anyone who doesn't know, Harlan and his family are going on vacation, and in order to do that, he kind of has to automate the Malevolent process, because he's very determined to get an episode out a week, a chapter out a week. So he is not going to be taking like a break. Malevolent doesn't stop even though Harlan goes on vacation, which is wild. And that's kind of partially why I think we have a coded vote.
Oh yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with that. And I also, if I remember correctly, Harlan did say as like a disclaimer to people, hey, by the way, it technically can be cracked, but it is not intended to be cracked, which once again kind of supports our belief that this is meant to almost be a story element to illustrate how jumbled Arthur and John are. I do want to point out a fantastic thing Fish said a little earlier. Fish says that regarding the vote, our ability to steer Arthur and John out of danger is impacted, just like how it seems Arthur especially cannot steer himself out of danger. So I really like that. I find that I really like that concept of the way that the story is now going so expansive that it's actually affecting game mechanics. Oh, that's like one of my favorite things ever, when game mechanics are used to tell the story.
Yeah. Fish also said, I do think that this is part of the code is solvable as it is now, given Harlan said he might want to release the solution after the polls close, but the point of it is that it's obstructed and it's expected of us to remain in the dark, not to uncover the answer in time. That's at least how I took the statement he made. I guess what I'm saying is that I don't know if the next polls will help us further unlock anything, or like they're all going to add up to pieces of a connected puzzle that clicks and makes sense in the end. I think it would be cool if it did, but I'm totally fine if it doesn't. I'm totally fine if we never get any answers. I don't mind it, which is not typical for me. I'm usually very much like, no, I want to get to the bottom of this person, but I don't think it really impacts my story, my enjoyment of the story, to not have this answer. I'm pausing this conversation because Paperflood drew Wiggle Snackers, and I love that. They're adorable. Oh my god.
They're like they almost look like almost weasels, but super, super long, almost like wisps of smoke.
Yes.
And they have cute,
or like flying squirrels.
Yeah, like flying. You know the ferret feet that are just the cute little tiniest little feet in the world. Yeah, they have kind of that. That is the cutest little creature in the world, and it's now decided you all are. Well, do you guys want to be called Wiggle Snackers, or should we continue to call these orb things Wiggle Snackers?
Anyway, that's a wonderful drawing. I love it. Okay. All right. So, as far as the vote goes, for that reason, there's not a lot to argue about. People don't really have an argument for one choice over another because nobody knows what anything means. So, a very interesting time to be a voter as far as how it feels to almost become powerless. In a similar manner, I think it's interesting to talk about how votes for how John responded to the hag versus votes for this and how different they can be. I think, however, that the kind of intent with, no matter what you pick, things are going to go a certain way is not something that Malevolent, contrary to what I'm sure is some belief out there, how it goes. I think Malevolent truly is changed by its votes. I know that it would be confusing and disappointing if it wasn't. And I think that in many cases, we don't have the benefit of knowing what would have happened if we picked another option. And that's what makes people doubt that it had an impact, because they don't know what would have happened if they hadn't. But I think that's a bigger statement on life, right? Like, how do you know that you made an impact on something if you don't see the effects of it if you didn't have an impact, right? I think there's a lot of people can doubt how much they affect the world around them, but you just have to kind of believe that you did. I think that every vote has counted, some more or less. I think there are definitely votes that are like, for example, bread versus cheese. I think that was a vote that probably didn't make the most mighty impact on the story, but it still would have made an impact. So I don't know, maybe.
I've heard Harlan directly mention the bread versus cheese vote, and he's like, you don't know if it was actually really important. He said that in like a Q&A or something.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I will say, when it comes to this vote specifically, it's a little difficult. Like, I think this is a great illustration of what happens when you lose your free will, whether you're being, what I call in a literal Fey sense, enthralled. I find that fascinating, where we have this element of horror of, for the past entirety of this podcast, we have always had the ability to vote. But now, I mean, we can still vote, but now is a time where we are so jumbled. We have no clue what we're actually voting for, and in a way, it's such a confusing cipher that it's just jumbling Arthur and John's capacity to think and act. And as a new element of horror, I find that incredibly fun. Of how are they going to get out of this? And what are they going to make Arthur and John to? Because typically, I know I'm still sticking with the will-o-wisp concept. I'm not going to cry and throw up if the will-o-wisp thing isn't an actual thing. But when it comes to, at the very least, we can just say the idea of a will-o-wisp, essentially, which is this being, this magical thing that leads someone to their death. Usually by leading them off a cliff, or if you see one, I know with Brave. Oh, you see your fate? Obviously.
That was beautiful. I loved that.
It's my bow. That's the only thing.
That was really, Peppers, that was really good.
It's the only accent I can do slightly.
I love it.
Like with Brave, they take obviously a much more child-friendly approach, but I do know that the original Will-O-Wisps was a lot more sinister, and it usually led people to their deaths. So, as essentially just a story element, I'm really curious what these Will-O-Wisps, or adjacent, whatever it may be, what the fuck they're gonna do with it.
Yeah. I think I'm very interested. I think it's especially going to be interesting seeing how people react to the part when they don't know just how significant the choices were. Like, I think as a person who is not part of the Patreon, it must be, I remember, once I found out that there is a voting mechanic, I remember trying to figure out where the votes lie because I didn't want to go look at the wiki and spoil myself. So I had to kind of guess which questions were posed to the audience versus which questions were just like for the narrative. And I remember thinking, why would you vote that way? Like, why would you do that? And of course, now as a voter, it's never that simple. But how do you possibly convey how difficult it is to vote when you don't even have the context of what you're voting for? Like, you don't know we don't even have a question, really. We don't even know what we're answering. There was no question posed. So yeah. It's interesting to see. It's going to be fun to see how people handle that. And I did see somebody on Tumblr recently discussing trying to figure out, like, okay, how does the voting work, and does it really make an impact, and how do people feel about the votes and things like that. I think it's a very unique experience that you can really only understand when you're part of it. And if you talk to somebody who is part of it, probably have a good idea.
Yeah.
I really quickly, for the last few minutes of Autopsy, want to ask a very serious and important question. Chat, if we were John and Arthur, which of us would be John and Arthur? Like, is Peppers the John or is Peppers the Arthur? I think I know what the popular answer is because we did ask Peppers' Twitch, but
yes.
I want to see what other people think.
Yes. Fuck you guys.
I will say right now, we're watching the counter. I think almost everybody in here is voting that I am the Arthur to Pepper's John.
Oh, fuck you guys.
One person is saying Pepper's
one. Oh, thank you.
I think people are just feeling bad for Peppers now and are voting the other way.
What if I start crying? Then would I be closer to John? Please. Me. I'll do like a little sad, like, John. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a John stan in the Christmas special. We don't have an Arthur stan. I love that. I think that's great. I wonder why.
I don't
Why?
fucking know. Is that a rhetorical question or what?
I mean, everyone's just saying vibes. I was really asking the audience, like, why would you vote that way? Like, why do you think Peppers is more John aligned?
I cuss a lot.
Well, so does Arthur.
Oh yeah, that's true. I did you see that really funny Tumblr post that was like, "Oh, John didn't cuss until he started talking more and more to
Yes.
Arthur." So John was the bad influence to this eldritch being. A cuss in an English accent. Oh, tiddly pop.
Oh my god.
Oh, fuck me.
John is very impressionable. Peppers, do you think you're impressionable?
No.
I don't think so either. I think you're very well.
No.
I think you're very stubborn, which is actually something I think more of Arthur. So that's interesting. The way Queen says Peppers is like John saying Arthur. I can't do any accent unless I hear it within like 10 seconds of trying to do it. So I can't do any kind of accent. I'm also incredibly wildly embarrassed. So that's very difficult. I can't even pretend to be. I'm more than willing to do some goofy impression of John's voice though. I think that's funny. I love everyone's John voices. Max says, I mean, how are your general relationships with identity and guilt?
Pretty fine, actually. I haven't killed anybody, so we're off to a good start. Oh shit, that's
yeah. Are you guys saying that I would consume a man's flesh and enjoy it? Like,
that's the question.
Is that what I'm supposed to get?
Which one of us is more likely to cannibalize? To cannibalize our prison mate? Now that's a different question.
I think Peppers would be more likely to cannibalize our prison mate.
No, I get tummy aches.
I'm an extremely picky eater. I'd rather die.
Well, I would not rather die. Yeah, I'd eat somebody instead of die.
Yeah. So I think that's very interesting. I think I asked this question actually not because I'm a narcissist, but because like I want to get the impression, like the picture of how do people see Arthur and John and their dynamic, and like what are the defining characteristics of these two, and how you would say who is the John to your Arthur, who is the Arthur to your John, right? Because I always think of it as like the more steady, stable, grounding force to somebody who is not as sure of themselves. And to me, that's so much more you, Peppers. I feel like you are very confident in who you are and
that's because
what you
I lie.
In.
Yeah, that's because I lie.
And I feel like I also, I don't know, I guess I don't really, I could see it going either way, but yeah, that's because I lie is very John Core.
No, I'm devastated. How can you say this to an Arthur stan? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, you know what I will say? The fact that you are an Arthur stan, it does, I think, more closely align you with John. Because I do not think Arthur is an Arthur stan.
Well, he has crippling guilt because he killed his daughter. So, did you kill your daughter, Queen? It's time to fess up.
No, I did not. I mean, I think John would have, I think John does feel guilty, and I think he feels really bad for doing what he did in the dark world, whatever that was. So there's that. He probably feels bad for saying mean things to Arthur sometimes.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he does.
He definitely feels bad to saying yes to erasing his memory.
Yeah. Well, and you know, that's actually very interesting if we want to discuss kind of John's. I really love the concept of we were able to see John's capacity for good and for more humanity. And the difficult thing, especially with season 4, is this question of, are these human qualities? Or is this something that John is able to have without being human? Maybe we shouldn't define John as quote unquote becoming more human. Maybe he's just becoming more of himself. But
Yeah.
we saw this capacity for guilt, and I mean, by what was it, like episode 2, where he already feels bad about Emily because now it's contextualized for him, and it's only
Yeah.
gonna get worse as time goes on. You notice that later on, still in season 1, because it wasn't that long ago that I re-listened to season 1, he's already very carefully moving around Arthur's boundaries. I understand that there's a mixture of manipulation there, but he's showing compassion and love and care for Arthur already that early in the season. So he's had this capacity for a really long time. I forgot where I was going with this.
That's fine.
Yeah, period. Period. Yes.
I like the what Graham said, to quote John, part 3 with the Wraith, I have to hope that any creature can be redeemed. I think it's interesting to think about stories of redemption and humanity and what makes somebody human and all that stuff, because I remember that John doesn't like, so these gods in this story don't have feelings about humans for the most part. Like when you're talking big scope gods, not like, the hag, where there's like a genuine dislike or disdain, but gods don't anything humans. They don't love them, they don't hate them, they don't really care about them. There's not really any, I don't see them as like elements to care about. It's kind of in the same way that some people think of ants, or, there's not really a feeling about these creatures. It's just kind of they exist and they're there. And for those gods to be like, I need this to happen, so I'm going to move this group of humans over here, and over here just happens to be, I don't know, death. It doesn't really affect them. They don't really care. So for John to have his eyes open to the fact that like there is something to care about here. They do have individual personalities, lives, connections. You start to understand how they think and connecting to the idea of humanity. I think it was great that John had to make the verbal distinction out loud that he is not capable of being able to follow all of Arthur's morals and values and belief systems, and he is not capable of really going back to the way he was, and that he has to be something his own. I think that is very much the core of one of Malevolent's big themes, which is just like, it doesn't have to be black and white all of the time. And I think trying to attribute only good, like only the positive aspects of John's change to humanity is a disservice to the fact that humanity can be pretty fucking awful, as
Yeah.
Arthur has demonstrated.
And even like in when people say the hag has a point, it wasn't that, what the hag said about John's true nature in the dark world. No, she didn't have a point regarding that. She did have a point regarding the evils of humanity, and essentially how she was the result of the worst of humanity. And so for Arthur to say, the good in John is based on his humanity, as he said, I believe in season 3. It's just wrong and also arrogant for him to say, because Arthur, who was human, brutally murdered several people just because he was going through it. He ate a guy. He's shot multiple people that he didn't necessarily need to. So I am loving the progression that this season is already taking with the concept of who John is and how his goodness isn't tied to being human. I find that
Yeah.
very compelling.
Yeah, I don't think it's intrinsic to him becoming more human. He doesn't have to be more human to have goodness, to exhibit behaviors of goodness, because goodness is not I don't think you can say being good is a trait, it's a choice. It's
Mm-hmm.
you have to make an active decision. Just the same with love. Love is not a noun, it's not something you possess. It's a choice you have to make every day. And the fact that John can acknowledge that you still have to make those choices regardless of whether you're going to align with humanity or something else, you still have to choose to be that that goodness.
Yeah.
um
Moss says something really funny. You eat one guy and no one ever lets it go.
It was kind of a huge fucking deal. I think, and you know what gets me about this may be fucked up of me, but I don't really care very much that he ate a guy. I care that he liked killing him. Like,
Yeah.
to me, that was not even the worst part of that story. It was the fact that Arthur admitted that it felt good to exert his power over that man and kill him. like I don't know, that was the part that was more bone
Yeah.
chilling to me than cannibalism, because to me cannibalism is, I'm, privileged enough, I think most people are, to not have any like personal relationship with or experience of cannibalism. So like, while it is a horrific act, it's something that I am very distant from in a way that doesn't touch me. It feels very fantastical to me, very far away. But the idea of somebody confessing that doing something horrible to another person made them feel good in any way or was satisfying, that is chilling to me, because I
Yeah.
can see that. I can see, and as a human, I think we've all had moments of feeling like being vindictive or petty or a little bit mean or rude felt good in the moment, and then later on you're like, oh my god, I felt off. Like, why did I like doing that? Is
Mm-hmm.
that who I am? Like,
Yeah.
what does that say about me? And I think a lot more about that. So when I refer to Arthur eating a guy, that's actually what I'm talking about, is the awful truth of the fact that he was okay with, he wasn't just okay with killing him, he liked it.
He liked it. Well, and also not even that, but yeah, he enjoyed it, especially when it comes to specifically Arthur's scenario. When it comes to cannibalism, in order for him to
Yeah,
survive, he had to. So
right.
I think in almost all circumstances, the majority of people would be like, okay, well, it's either cannibalize a guy or die. So like, which one are you going to choose, really?
Yeah,
So that doesn't necessarily make me go, oh, it's it's a funny joke to point out as a sort of
right.
shock value of, oh, compare your favorite horror podcast or your favorite horror protagonist. Mine ate a guy, and that's like a really funny thing. But it's not only the fact that he enjoyed it in and he killed him in such a horrific way, but he repeated it. He repeated it with
Yeah,
Uncle. When I don't want to say Uncle is innocent, I have seen some debate regarding Uncle and in regards to his sentience, in regards to his, free will. I personally do not think that Uncle is an innocent party in this. I do think perhaps his intelligence is limited in some way, but he absolutely did tear the jaw off of a lady, off of a crying, innocent lady. So I don't necessarily feel that bad about Arthur killing Uncle, because it's very likely that Uncle
right.
killed many more in request of Larson. But at the same time, you can also argue that Uncle was probably a victim, because I believe Uncle was implied to be Larson's son, that he kind of turned into a goat, into this like massive ram creature that's kind of sort of been resurrected into this monster that's still like a victim. But essentially, Arthur is given these choices, and you notice that in his darkest moments, he does horrific stuff, which is killing Faust. And then, now, this could just be me assuming, but if I remember correctly, when he, ate Faust, John had to relive, that death 1,000 times over. Did Arthur ever mention
Yeah.
that he enjoyed that as punishment to John? Or did he only say that he enjoyed killing, Faust?
He definitely didn't. I don't think he mentioned actually enjoying it for the intention of like punishing John, but that implication was, I mean, for me, was
Yeah.
certainly there.
Yeah. I like to imagine that there was a little bit of resentment towards John. And so there is a small part of me that is kind of like, it does track that perhaps at the very beginning he thinks that, John deserves this. But it's very
Right.
obvious very early on that Arthur is deeply ashamed by this, because the moment he wakes up with Yellow and kind of that, he's reliving that emotional experience. Like, it seems like he has to confess this to Yellow because he's been carrying that guilt. I'm so sorry. My cat is licking my palm, the palm of my hand, and
No.
it's trying so hard not to laugh.
I also think that specifically, Scotty said something that I want to read out, which was, "Can you imagine the lack of control Arthur had been feeling for months, and then being faced with choice? Can you imagine the relief, the catharsis of his anger, even though it was misplaced? Not saying it's okay, it's not, but I feel for the guy. His wrath gets him in trouble every time." I definitely feel that with regards to the cannibalism thing, from what I understood of the audio that I listened to, and I haven't listened to it again in quite some time, they actually like facilitate Arthur eating Faust. Like, I don't, I if I recall it, they like occasionally they prepare it in some fashion.
Hmm.
I do remember them being particular about mentioning that, like, at least it's cooked this time or something like that. um and so I do believe that you could, Arthur's conscience can get away with saying the cannibalism maybe was something he was forced into, was something, oh, that was different human meat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
okay.
because it was mentioned that Arthur ate until there was nothing left.
Okay.
And then they used Faust's remains to create a weapon, essentially.
Right. Okay. So I do think that there is some element of it that where Arthur, he can talk himself into the fact that it was survival and all of that, and it can be a little more forgivable. I also do think that he was very upset with, I mean, at the time in the pits, we really can only speculate about how his relationship with John was until they reference it more, if they ever do. I think there was a lot of stuff that we missed as far as how they felt about each other and how awful things got between them, because I know that John and Arthur were still in a really rough position
Yeah.
during that time, and I can totally see Arthur at first being like, "So what, you're getting death visions, suck it up, because that's you did something unforgivable to me and you betrayed my trust and I really don't care." And then eventually going, "Okay, well, this was fun when it was new and now it's not." That like, okay, the revenge doesn't feel good anymore. I am done and I can't stop doing it, because if I do, I die. So that kind of regret, I think, too, probably follows him around. I also think that as far as we're talking with Arthur and his flaws, he definitely has a temper. I mean, we've seen it
Hmm.
exhibited over and over and over again in so many ways that it doesn't need to be that violent or that intense, and it always is. Arthur doesn't know how to do gentle. He doesn't. You can't say Arthur beat up a guy and have him walk away with some bruises and a bloody nose. He's gonna get something broken. Like, it'll be lucky that the dude survives. So
Yeah.
I don't, I think Arthur's one of his major flaws as a character is his wrath, his inability to control his temper, which you have to wonder, is that something that was always an issue? Is that something that happened after Thoreau? Is that something that,
I
because he,
I do
go ahead.
I do actually have a thought on that, because it was shown in a dream. Now, I do understand that dreams do show, they're not always 100% accurate. It could just be Arthur's current wrath playing in a past Arthur, but Arthur did have a dream about shouting at Thoreau when Thoreau
Yeah.
whether it's Thoreau or Tess interrupts him while he's playing piano. And as someone who is especially sensitive to angry men specifically,
Yeah.
that was always a character flaw that I always flinched at, that I was always like, ooh, that's really not a side that
Yeah.
I like in Arthur at all. And that, out of anything else, out of, Arthur being, getting drunk, Arthur
Yeah.
being arrogant, that was the one where I was like, oh, this brother is absolutely from the 1930s.
Yeah, that men shouting and being angry and sounding aggressive in that manner also is very upsetting to me for my own reasons, and that is something that has always been one of Arthur's flaws that has been very hard for me to, like, not forgive or ignore or forget about, but it's just one of those things that it's always kind of sits in the back of my head that I remember that he's like that.
Mhm.
And that has nothing to do with survival. That has nothing to do with the horrors of the situation that he's in. He gets like that. And there's a lot I can forgive John for as far as how he reacts. He used to be a god that was not used to not getting his way. So yeah, he's gonna have some issues. With Arthur, it hits home for me the fact that somebody can have such a deep flaw that resonates with me personally, and I can still appreciate them as a character. And I think that speaks a lot to how Malevolent treats characters as very real and very honest depictions of real people that you know. And I think it can be really hard to confront that, because you want to say, I should be able to root for Arthur the entire time.
No.
There are fully some times where I'm like, no, Arthur absolutely deserves this. Like, he needs to get hit around for a little bit. He
Yeah.
fucked up, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel that it can be really conflicting as a listener to more nuanced media, that feeling of like, I don't know if I'm on the hero's side all the time, or the hero protagonist side all the time.
Well, and that's why I love the writing of Malevolence so much, is that, you know, we are given complex characters who have these deep flaws, who impact a lot of us are victims of men in the family who have big anger problems. And so I know a lot of us are, you know, very personally affected by that. And me personally, I tend to look down on people like that who have that flaw, even though it's very likely perhaps something that's, you know, generally has been a generational trauma passed down and down and down. Who knows? Maybe Arthur's father was this angry as well. Maybe, you know, the orphanage he was raised in. But ultimately, that doesn't matter, because now he is, you know, the person who is angry, and imagining him shouting at Fro makes me unbearably like furious with him. So I remember when the very first time I listened to that episode where he shouts and, you know, he says, "Leave me alone." Yeah, for those of us who have experienced, you know, older men in the family who act like that, those of us who have experienced that, it like threw me all the way back to that memory. And so it's a great kind of storytelling element of, by the way, this guy has some issues. He is not flawless. And that's what makes him compelling, because you wouldn't be, I think all of us just innately, whether we are conscious of it or not, will not engage with a story where the main character is a goody two shoes and is perfect all the time. That tends to be a very flat character that not many of us are interested in. And so Arthur having these deep flaws make him even more compelling and interesting to me, because it's so human.
Max says, there was a post I read recently that was, I think, about Parker, but one of the quotes from it was that Arthur looks like a nice man because he is put directly next to an eldritch god, and that's such a real thing. That is a really impactful statement. Like, the fact that the person that we're closest to right after Arthur is fucking John, the bar is real damn low. I think if we got to follow, for example, I don't know, just throwing out random names, having absolutely no bias at all. If we were to follow around, like, I don't know, Noel, Charlie Dowd, we might feel differently about Arthur, or we might have a different perspective. I think that there are, like, Fish, this is what I was just going to bring up. Fish just said, the shouting always read to me like it was a way his mind twisted things. We also have the fact that, like, it could be Arthur's unreliable narration of events, where he felt like he's responsible for Faro's death in such a direct way that he believes that that's how it happened, when that's not how it happened. We will really never know, but we are listening to this from Arthur's perspective at all times, pretty much. So I think it would make sense to believe that is that for all intents and purposes, as far as the story goes, believing that is how it happened, to me, makes sense. I have respect for everybody's ideas and opinions. I know there's other theories floating around about how, like, you know, it's someone else's fault that Faro's dead, or whatever. That's totally fine. You have your headcanons. I am not going to disparage them. I just, from what is told in canon events and how that impacts the story, I think it's significant that people remember Arthur was capable of this kind of stuff before the podcast. Like, no, he probably wouldn't have chosen to kill a guy by driving his thumbs into his eyes, but he sure did scream at his child. Like, there's some flaws there that are inherent to him and not just exclusive to his adventures in horror.
Yeah, I will also just make a note of things when people are mentioning this dream being the night that Faroe died. I do want to push back on that because I did listen to it quite literally like a week or so ago. It was not the same from what I understood. It sounded like it was not the same day that Faroe died because Arthur's playing piano. She is not in the bathtub. She is not being looked after by Tess. There's just not, to me, there's not enough clues to suggest that that was the same night that she died. But I do think it is a compelling point that this could very well be a dream where Arthur's guilt is bleeding through, and because he finds himself to be such a bad parent, that he is now dreaming of an idea where he is lashing out at Faroe because, well, I mean, he let his daughter die, so would that really be that big of a stretch? At the same
Right.
time, it's a nuanced discussion. I mean, maybe that would be I think that would be a bit too morbid of a poll choice, but it's a also completely possible that Arthur did do that because he has shown even in canon to have a temper with John where he just kind of flies off the handle and you're like, holy shit, dude, like relax.
Yeah.
There's a couple of points, especially when it comes to, maybe John digging too deeply in his past instead of him, setting a firm line of, hey, stop it, like, and him being very calm about it. I'm sorry, I know that we're we're now going over time, but to
No, that's okay.
just conclude my thought of he has shown multiple times to, instead of just being like, hey, don't push anymore, it's stop it, and this is very, my cat just flinched.
Oh.
This very loud, him being very aggressive and very angry with John, that if I was perhaps in the place of John, I can already imagine myself shutting down and not talking to him, because it's, a lot of us have had that experience, and it's very interesting to see that part because I don't often think about it because I'm like, Arthur's my guy, he's such a good person. Well, sometimes he's not, and I find these moments interesting to talk about because they're very uncomfortable moments that not a lot of us like to think about. And so it's interesting to then bring them up in canon, just be like, by the way, these are canonical, points of proof that we have of Arthur not having a good handle on his temper.
Yeah, I think to bring that back around to the current chapter, I think it's extremely interesting that we get a lot of nice confirmation about Faroe and the fact that, like, she's, that Arthur now has a reason to live, and she's kind of hanging out with him or watching over him or whatever, however you want to call it. And now we have children laughing, and Arthur just kind of being like, no, they're gonna help us, that's chill, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you start to play on Arthur's weaknesses in such an obvious way, I don't know, there's something, to me, this is the beginning of something that I feel is deeper than, oh, that's obviously some kind of malevolent entity. I think it's deeper than that. I don't know. I'm getting a very weird feeling about the fact that why would you put such obvious bait out there?
Mm-hmm.
I'm suspicious, and I'm also very excited for more puzzles and codes and riddles that we're probably
Yeah.
gonna
I,
get
I'm
solved.
excited for it to pick up, and it's so funny because what I expected is for them to go to a tavern and go on their merry way first, and then they go into this like bizarre
Right.
area. But no, right now they're in the middle of a forest, and creepy children are laughing at him. And then he's like, "Faroe, I'm gonna walk over to you," and I'm like, "Please, God, it's been one episode. I swear, if you die again, I'm gonna lose it."
Well, Peppers, you only get one wish granted, and Arthur got to sleep for hours.
He did
So
3 whole out. Yeah, it was like, yeah, it was probably good 4 hours. Woohoo!
all John said is he slept, and he said hours plural, and that's really all we can ask for.
At least 2. This is confirmation, guys.
Minimum 2 hours. Okay, well, it was great chatting with you again. I loved our discussion. Thank you guys for listening. I know that we didn't talk that much about the current chapter, but it was a very, very, like, I don't know, there wasn't a lot to say about it because it's a mystery that we don't really have a lot of ideas about yet, and I had fun anyway. I think we had some good analysis going on.
Oh my gosh. As a final note, Paper Flood went ahead and colored I already forgot what we call these
Wickle
guys.
snackers.
Wickle snackers. And they're eating somebody's shoes, and it's colored, and it's so cute, and I love it so much.
It's adorable. You guys are the best. Thank you guys for showing up all the time.
Yeah, thank you for adding some really funny commentary. You guys really make it so much more fun. And you guys are cool, and we love you guys.
Yes.
Not parasocially though, even though, yeah, I love the idea of you guys. Please don't come to my house. Yeah.
All right. Well, Peppers, I will see you next week, right?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna make that joke. Yeah, yep. You're gonna see me next. Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. The horrors persist.
And so do we.
Bye.